Released on Sunday, January 27th, 2016.
This Agile Life.
Episode 105.
Ding! Elevator retrospective. Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Agile Life, a podcast about what it's like to be agile in the real world. My name is Jason Tice, otherwise known as the Agile Factor, and we want to thank you for joining us today for our podcast where we're going to have an awesome discussion. Joining me is Lee McCauley. How you doing, Lee?
Hey, I am excited to be here. It's been so long. I've missed you guys.
Good. And we also have Craig Buchek.
Hey, everybody. I do not have an also known as.
Okay. And then last, but certainly not least, what are you trying to improve today, Amos King?
Everything. I can't pick one thing today. Today has been pretty good. I just felt very motivated all day. So
Awesome.
I'm gonna solve all my problems today while I still feel motivated.
Were you happy?
I was happy today.
Did you measure your happiness metric, Amos?
No, I did not. I should. I am a big fan of the happiness metric. I think it's because I've been trying to be a little healthier. I'm full of energy and motivated. I'm starting to realize where Tice gets all of his energy from.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, anyways, let's move on to our real discussion tonight. So here's our background for everyone listening. So it is January 2016, and recently we had Diana Larsen, who is one of the co-authors of the book Agile Retrospectives. She authored the book with Esther Derby, and she was in town to do some work for an organization. But while she was here, she actually held an open community event, which was actually facilitated in using what they call a stalwarts style conversation, where Diana sat on a bench up in the front of the room, and she invited people to come up and engage in dialogue with her. And the dialogue went on for a few minutes, and it was kind of based upon questions that people asked. So what we've done is we've extracted some of the questions, and we thought we would talk about them and kind of share our thoughts. So I guess we'll just get started. So the first question, I will ask the questions, at least to get started, maybe we'll pass this off later on, is for a new Scrum Master, what advice would you have for people that don't like retros?
So I was actually at the Diana Larsen event, and my company that I'm currently working at is who invited her. So I actually spent a couple days with her. So I think she mentioned, and I had agreed with her, that retrospective is a time to work on improving your team. And so ask your team if they think that they're done with, if they can't improve.
So I think this gets to the enjoyment of a retrospective, which I'm not positive is a requirement. But if they're not engaged, then I think that's the same thing. And to get people engaged, it seems like either the facilitator isn't doing a good job, or B, maybe they need to have a retro on what can improve their retros.
Huh.
Right?
I do have a little retro at the end of my retros usually.
Well,
This is a hard question to answer without knowing what is causing them not to like it. So I think the retro on why you don't like it is a fantastic place to start. But what I find is that people who don't like it either they have a ton to say and they don't feel comfortable saying it, or you're playing a bunch of games and they don't feel like they're getting anything out of it. And your retro games need to go somewhere. And I see a lot of facilitators that have games that are great games to play once you have a team who is really comfortable and open. But before that, they're just games and they never make it past that point.
So,
It's not me making fun of you this time.
so she actually had a follow-up question to the person asking this question, and I believe it was, what kind of activities or exercises or games are you doing? And the answer was basically the what went well, what went poorly, and what should we try. And one piece of advice she had that was really good was, don't do the same activity every time. It's just not effective, especially if they're either not coming up with action items or they're not following up with their action items.
so the thing that I took notes on when she said this was actually a week before Diana was in St. Louis. We had Luke Holman in St. Louis. and we had an event with him too. And one of the things he shared there at that event is that, we kind of made up this practice in Agile in Scrum of having a retro at the end of every sprint. And one thing Luke said that was kind of profound is that maybe retros aren't effective because we're having them too frequently. And we're just going through the motions because, it's the end of the sprint, let's have a retro. Or it's that time of the week, let's have a retro. And
I disagree.
You disagree?
Usually, most people I know aren't doing them enough. Although a lot of teams that I see doing sprints too, they're not doing weekly sprints. They're doing monthly sprints and having a retro at the end of a month, and they don't know what happened that first week. They have moved past a lot of the problems that they had during that time to where it's either old hat and they're used to it, and so they don't recognize it as pain anymore, or they don't even care. They're like, I don't want to recall that time 3 weeks ago when I broke down and I cussed out Tice. Let's just not talk about it.
Well, I don't know. To me, the thing that the guidance I give teams is I really don't like time triggering retros. I like events triggering retros, and really an effective retro, it should have an outcome. Bonus points if your outcome can be framed as a measurable experiment. Because then guess what? Go do the experiment. During the retro, say, we commit as a team to try this for 2 weeks. And maybe we'll have some criteria that if it's a disaster, we will abort. But we will push through it for 2 weeks so we could come in with data and we could say, thumbs up, it was awesome, or thumbs down, we're never doing that again. And have a scientific process there. If you do that, you'll have effective retros.
If you don't have a planned retro, though, you're going to go for months without one, and you're not going to change anything.
And can we talk about that thumbs up and thumbs down real quick? Because just because you try something and everybody gives it a thumbs down doesn't mean you need to stop doing that new thing. Maybe you need to analyze that new thing that you're doing and see if it's really bringing out other pains that you should change.
But what I'm saying is, Amos, defining the experiment, it forces a feedback loop, so then you can have a whole team conversation about what to do next. And I simply see many teams that aren't following the process with that level of rigor.
So I think that gets to having an effective retro, and I think that would make it better for people as buy-in as long as they think that it's effective. But I have another problem, which is I run out of things to do that are different. Now, I find myself making up stuff on the fly that work out pretty well, that are based on the situation, and I can usually go in with some activity kind of in my back pocket, but I rarely end up using the one that I actually plan to use because something in the team says, that's not going to be the right thing today.
You mean you run out of activities during the retro, not
new
changes?
No, new activities. I run out of new activities, things that aren't just. We did this 3 times in the last 6 months, or 6 weeks.
Hey Lee, call me. I've been described. I'm a buffet. I'll give you some.
I
can run on the spur of the moment.
Well, you have some good stuff there in that you said, I come in and I realize before we even start that the activity I have planned isn't going to work, but you have enough in your arsenal that you're able to pull something else out. The big thing is especially if your teams are not happy with your retros, I think you might need to spend a little more time as the facilitator preparing. I've been on a lot of teams where someone from the team runs the retro or someone external runs it. Maybe try swapping that up a little bit if it starts to get bored.
So I did do something that I would love to get your feedback on that might relate to this. So I think that occasionally doing something that's just a little bit silly in short time that doesn't necessarily have a big payoff, as long as you've gotten the big payoff. So on a recent retro, at the last 5 minutes of the retro, we actually did, because I do a little thing every day, how did the last week go? And we do the little 1 to 10 thing, right? And it's just something that the team expects. And so when we talk about real quick the changes in that that vector, right? And so at the end, I said, well, we spent the entire time talking how I can get to that 10 mark. Now I want you to figure out we're going to play Cards Against Humanity retro style, and give me your funniest thing that's appropriate that will get you to the 1. And we spent 5 minutes. Everybody just threw something out, and everybody had a good laugh, and we ended it. And I think stuff like that on occasions makes the retros not quite so much of a chore.
Yeah, and Lee, what I'm hearing there a little bit, I mean, I'm hearing it's fun, but I'm also hearing a little bit of a reference to metaphor. And almost what I would encourage you to do is don't do that at the end of the retro. Do that at the beginning of the retro, almost to kind of set the stage. And instead of having people talk in context about whatever the problems are, have them talk in a metaphor, because that forces people to start to ask clarifying questions. And by asking those clarifying questions, that's how we can actually learn what the problems are.
I've got a metaphor game for you.
Okay, let's play right now.
I've done this with a team. No, we can't play it right now. I'm not prepared for this because I'm not prepared for this.
Just whip it out, Amos.
So you split your team into 2 groups, and one group writes down a set of nouns for each person in that group that has to do with work, like whether it's like code or whatever. They just write some nouns, and then the other half of the team writes random nouns that they find interesting, and then you put those 2 together, like you pair these lists side by side, and then everybody on the team has to write a sentence, but each sentence they have to write a bunch of sentences, but each sentence has to use the 2 nouns there as a metaphor for each other. So you get crazy stuff like the pairing is a dog, the pair switching is a dog, and then they have to write a sentence using that metaphor, and it has created some great stuff. And then you can do the same thing with an adjective and a noun.
Could you do? It sounds like a Mad Libs thing. Is that what you're talking about?
Kind of, but they're supposed to try to actually come up with something like how is that a dog, and like expand on that. And
I got it.
Has drawn out a bunch of stuff. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. And for those of you that are into other types of things like that, there's a whole practice out there. It's called clean language. And it's about how to take a metaphor and ask more clarifying questions to learn. So it would be like, Amos, tell me more about how your pairing is like a dog. And then we go on and we go on and we go on. And what's funny is most people, number one, are laughing. But what you realize is they're laughing, they're engaged, and they're actually learning, which is what's most important. The thing that I have to admit I really liked that Diana did emphasize about retros, because there were a lot of questions at this session about retros, was that a retro is really, we talk a lot about process improvement, but at its core, it really is a learning activity, because people should be having team discussions to learn what they can do. All right, so it got quiet. So I think that's our signal to move on. So we're not using a timer tonight. So, but if it gets quiet, maybe we'll go on to another question, and I'm sure we'll light it up again. Shall we?
Sure.
Who would like to be the next question reader?
I'll do it.
Thank you, Amos, for volunteering.
What do you do to introduce Agile transformation to teams that have no background in Agile?
Who would like to answer?
So Tice has been making me think more in this direction, and Diana definitely pushed me much, much further. Invite them. Don't try to convince them. So you have to show them. You have to make them want it without trying to make them want it, I guess. You have to show the value. You have to be excited about it. Think about how we got into Agile. You knew someone that was excited about it enough to tell you about it, show you, explain how it's working, why it's working. Maybe that was in a book, but probably it was someone you knew in person that explained that to you and got excited. And then you took a leap of faith and trusted them.
Yeah, or I was going to say more specifically, like for all of us, actually, I think many of us, voluntarily chose to work for a company that chose to do Agile. And so we kind of said, oh, we'll check it out. Probably because we saw it and we said, hey, that makes common sense.
But I think the question gets more at, from a consulting basis, how do you go in and introduce something to a new team, right? And I think the answer starts with, you don't really introduce it as, here's this great new thing that we're going to be doing or trying or whatever. It's you start with improvement, right? We think we can get better. Even though you guys are great, you're doing all these great things, but you know what? I think we can go even further, and that's where you start. Now let's talk about how do we go further. Now you can start introducing some of the things that are good engineering practices and why they're good engineering practices and good process practices and why they're good. And it's that why. Once you've started talking about that, you get people out of their standard perspective.
And I like that you started with, I think we can get better. First of all, you're including yourself because you're saying we, but at the same time, you're putting the power in their hands. You're saying that we can do this and you can do this, and it's going to be great to have you on this journey because you're going to bring yourself to the table, and that's what we need. And so you're, in a way, with that one little statement, you're showing that you're a team by being with them, but you're also empowering them.
So I would also add that one of the best things when introducing it is not to talk about, or in addition to talking about the team and improving the team, you also have to emphasize improving the individual, because ultimately what people are doing in their jobs is for their own benefit, and you got to keep that in mind. So as long as they feel like they're improving themselves, they will continue to improve the team along with it.
So when you're beginning with Agile, even though all our Agile practices derive from the Agile values and principles, actually I advise not to start there. Start with something that's going to make a small change that's going to be visible, get a small win, something practical. Make a small improvement that's practical, going to make an impact on the team. And then keep building on that. Smaller, snowball, bigger and bigger, and then explain why you're doing it, and go back to those values. And this is something I've been learning lately, that we usually think that our behaviors are based on our thoughts and our values, but it turns out that a lot of times we have that backwards. So if you can start influencing the behavior, it'll build those values up eventually.
One of the things I like to do when coming onto a new team and trying to introduce Agile, and a lot of other coaches and developers that I've talked to kind of find this very counterintuitive, which I think there's a lot of things that we find that way when we start doing Agile, is I actually go after the newest person on the team, like the youngest, most junior member, and I start to try to get them on board with some of the practices and moving. And when people see them improve, they expect them to improve anyway, but when they see that new guy improving faster than they thought that they should, then they want to start getting on board. So I actually start with like the more junior guys, and I kind of let the senior guys just run however they were already running, and then work from the bottom up that way.
Yeah, with that, Amos, I want to actually make sure we jump back to something that Lee said when we got this started, and make sure people understand it. Because I think what Lee did a really good job of describing was how when Agile starts, it really needs to be a people-focused activity. So, it's not mystery consultant that's shown up with a black coat that says, "Thou must do pair programming." That because it is Agile and I have blessed it. That's not it. It's the people having autonomy to decide how they want to work. Maybe they have a coach to get some help if they need it, but those decisions are ultimately made by the people who will be responsible for what's built. And what I see, and I think you guys have lived this too, all too often, is that there is a mandate. It's more like, no, we must do pair programming. And I think we could do a whole podcast how that doesn't work. As a reference out there, I'll put this in my picks, for which I will now have to have more than one pick. There's a guy who's written a whole book about how to use this idea, what they call open space, to begin an Agile transformation. And so instead of going off to a training class where everyone learns about Agile and you learn about the beauties of this mysterious person called a Scrum Master, you simply have a circle and you talk, just like you guys are saying, about the current challenges we have, the current pain we're feeling, and you create that case for change that motivates people to say, I want to step up, I want to learn something, and I want to change how I can work so we can improve.
That's actually the reason why I dislike Scrum, is simply because it prescribes certain practices, which is by its nature not necessarily a person-centric sort of a methodology. I know exactly. I know that it all depends on how you execute it, and so it's maybe not a fair statement. But.
I think when you say that we're doing X or doing Y, and it's a set of prescribed practices, that it makes it simple for people to try to tear things apart whenever you aren't doing part of it. Whenever the team wants to move on from part of it, they're like, well, it's all crap then. And they lump all of it as one big package, and they don't look at the pieces as well. So it's a hard place to start for me, actually. I always called Scrum training wheels for Agile, but I really don't think it is. I think it's training wheels for something else that's not Agile.
So let me ask this. Does anyone know the subtitle to the Scrum Guide?
I picked the Scrum Guide actually last episode.
Oh boy,
I've read it, but I can't remember.
I don't know what to tell you, but it's like the definitive guide to the rules of the game, or something to that effect. And the key thing is they define Scrum as a game, and again, was one of Luke Holman's buzzwords that people were tweeting when he was in St. Louis earlier in January, was when games have rules for a reason, because rules were made to be broken. So maybe Scrum is a way to go ahead and get started. I mean, take Monopoly. Monopoly, if we played it by the rules, it would take like a half hour. That's what they say. Last time I played a Monopoly game with my family, we played it for like 5 days because we have all of our own crazy rules that we've made up because they work for us. So I think, Amos, to your point, maybe Scrum's training wheels, maybe you start with what the book says, but guess what? If something's not working or something doesn't feel right or you feel pain, it's okay to break the rules.
The thing is, with your family, you're in a pretty consistent group of people that are always the same. And a lot of times in business, you are in a group of people that change a lot more often than your family does. You have people coming onto the team, people leaving the teams. And with those new people coming in, you get a lot of pushback on changing those rules and having house rules. And people are like, well, then don't call it Scrum. And they get hung up on, this is what it is, and now you're not doing it.
Okay,
so you're not being.
So that is little dog. So that's bad because that's dogmatic. But the key thing I want to ask is when that person shows up, how does that dialogue go? So I'm your new person. So hi, Miss, I'm on the team here.
I'm not saying it's the new person saying it. I'm saying because of the cycling of people, you get that. It's not always the new person that's saying it.
What I wanted to ask, and what I've seen a lot of is where people don't communicate effectively to explain why a team that is established has chosen to work the way they have. So new person shows up, they're expected, even if the team has the most beautiful charter on the wall, whatever, there is still a leap of faith that I think a lot of Agilists have that this person is just going to figure it out. And what I see is an opportunity for both teams and new people on teams, as you're describing, to have better dialogue to promote better learning.
Like hour-long pair switches. Just had to say that for Craig because I wanted to see his face. Okay, let's role play. So hey, Amos, I'm the new guy. Why on earth do you do hour-long pair switches? That's dumb. Oh, here, you want me to get my paper out here? I've actually been writing a lot of this down.
Here, let me summarize what he's going to say. Because it works for us.
Gold plating reduction, knowledge sharing, technical debt reduction, and you spread the brilliance around so that everybody can be brilliant.
Okay, but Amos, I'm new. I need some more time to gotta get my head around the story. I don't think I could do that in an hour. So do I have to do that?
How about watch the team's example? If the team seems to be doing it well, which they probably are, because if they didn't find effective, they would probably stop doing it. So why not observe what they're doing and take this as an opportunity to learn?
And I think as a new person on any team, there's a little bit of you have to observe for a little bit, but not so long that you end up forming habits that you think that they should change. So there's a very fine line between listening and understanding and following along for a little bit and then becoming complacent.
Well, I like that actually, and what I would do from that, because we actually do this when we coach and train facilitators for how to like lead games, is how to have observers. So I would say that maybe, Amos, an opportunity here to help people listen to you if they have this new team member scenario, which you've described, is, say, hey, for the next week, you're an observer on our team. And what we want you to do is not actually do any like direct work, but we want you to be part of the team. We want you to be engaged, and we want you to write down everything that you think is interesting or that you have a question about. And then at the end of that week, we want to see all these note cards. We're going to throw them on a table, and we're going to go through them all. And we're going to have a great conversation that's going to help you learn, but we're also going to have an open mind, and we're going to say, if you have an idea or an experience that you think would help us improve, we're going to give you we're going to give you an opportunity to have a conversation about that. And I'd love to know, has anyone done that? Like on a real team?
No, I don't let the new guy talk.
We've actually got a program at our current place I work called an engineer exchange program, where for a week you can go visit another team and see how they're working and spread ideas around and see, bring some things back like, oh, hey, they're doing 1 hour pair switching. You're like, it's crazy, but it's working.
Well, I like that, because that's a little bit of self-organization, it sounds like.
My current client, you can do that every day. You can just go to a different team and be like, hey, you guys need some help?
Well, so let me ask this. Craig, I know when Diana was in town, you shared that she had actually facilitated an open space for your organization. Could you? And you said you liked it. Could you tell us why? Like,
it was sort of, we were invited, not, there was no coercion. So the way we were invited to attack problems was very conducive to everyone having a voice, to enthusiasm, to problem solving and brainstorming. And the amount of contribution from, a majority of the people there was pretty amazing. And we did come up with, we talked through the problems we're having. We ended up noticing themes across, the multiple problems we were having that, ended up mostly being about communication between the teams, was one of the big ones. And I'm sure that's probably the case at most companies. So just the way things were allowed to happen, basically, and having that permission for anything to happen allowed the best things to sort of happen. It's hard to explain, actually.
That was incredibly vague.
Yeah. And I think that's the point. I mean, open spaces apparently came from hallway tracks at conferences where people said, just the conversations I have in the hallways between conference talks is more valuable than the conference talks half the time. So how do we facilitate that? And they found a way, and it can be really effective, I found.
Yeah, and we've done you guys, if you listen to prior picks, we've rolled a few of these actually open to the community in the St. Louis area, and I believe a few others have probably attended open space elsewhere. But it was created by Harrison Owen, and one of his statements in the book about it is that it's actually be prepared to be, I believe he uses the word surprised. Because what happens if you go to more of like a traditional workshop or a traditional conference, you effectively go in with some element of expectation about what you're going to get, because you've seen the syllabus, you've seen the program, and your brain starts to judge that. Whether you wish to acknowledge it or not, you start to judge it, because that's just the way we work as humans. An open space does not allow that to happen, and really to show respect to everyone involved, you simply discover what is available for discussion by being present and in the space, and then those who are willing to basically offer to convene a session about a particular topic, challenge, or whatever. And again, I have this a colleague that I've worked with, Dan Mesnick. He's the guy that wrote this book about how to use open space within the context of an agile transformation. I have had the opportunity to do this, and I will just say it is a much more effective way to go almost full circle back to what Lee said, how to have on day one of your Agile transformation, have effective conversations where people from teams are engaged, they're learning, and everyone is rallying around this idea of let's start to improve and let's start to learn.
So I would push back on everyone. So one of the very few rules of an open space is the law of 2 feet, which says that if you're not getting something or contributing to a conversation in a session, you can leave. And so you may not find anything of value to contribute or learn from, and you may actually leave the open space completely.
Well, and what I'll say, and actually what my colleague Dan Messer would say, is if you have that with Agile transformation, they're effectively not part of the transformation because they're not supporting the effort. And I think that's where many organizations go wrong, because the term in a coaching community we use is we say they're pushing Agile by mandate. So, hey, team, you must all effective next Monday. You are Agile. Boom.
I don't believe in enforcing people, but I am not beyond begging.
Yeah.
Coercion?
Yes.
Bribery?
Please try this. I'll buy you all pizza.
That
Sounds like bribery.
Okay, well, this is not a pick, but since we talked about open space, just for those that listen, we're gonna do a regional event in St. Louis in the spring. We don't have a date yet, so it's not a pick, but listen to us, you'll hear it. But we are gonna do a regional Agile open space in the spring of 2016, and then we are actually going to do an Agile Coach Camp, which we're working with the Coach Camp people on in the fall. So it'll be in the fall, like, you know, we don't have an NFL team anymore, so we'll have a Coach Camp instead. And if you listen to us, we would invite you to come and join us. This will be actually organized through ACC US, so it will be actually an Agile Coach Camp. So join us.
And we really need to fill up the entire stadium, otherwise it's going to go to waste.
No, we're not. We're using a big venue, but it's not that big. Okay,
and we is who? Because it's not This Agile Life.
No, this is something that I'm doing. I'm the organizer. I will inevitably need some help, and for the many people who have pinged me on Twitter, yes, thank you for helping. We're working with venue to get date confirmed, and once we have that done, we'll have a bunch of work that those of you that have volunteered to help in advance, thank you so much. We will be in touch, and I hope, put it this way, I hope you guys from the podcast, both on the podcast and listening, would consider this as an opportunity to join us. So watch this space. More to come later in 2016. Let's go on. Another question. And people still want to have a This Agile Life conference. I'll mention that. Conferences, there's a lot of work. Anyways.
Okay, I'll take the next one.
Okay, go for it, Lee.
We're a real small team. Do we really need to do this every sprint? Is the retro framed correctly?
And can I add, because I think...
was that like 4 questions?
It's all one line.
It was all one line. And what the good clarification here is the person came up, and the first thing Diana asked, she said, how many people are on your team? And Craig, I think it was 2 people. So it's a very small team.
When they say small, they really mean it.
Was it 2
My
developers
partner
plus
and
other
I are
people there, I
a
think?
small team. Well, I like to have retros with my wife, and we're a 2-person team.
I've had a retro by myself.
And we've had introspectives. I keep a like a journal, and every day I write in it on like what were the goals for the team today, how effective was I at helping them meet those goals, and in what ways did I hurt in trying to meet those goals, and are my goals the same as the team's goals?
But the question is, can we do what, if you've got a small team like that, is it easier to do what Jason suggested at the beginning and make retros event-driven, and then the retro is essentially like a turnaround, and you discuss the issue as it comes up?
My favorite event-driven retro times are Fridays.
I like that too.
Every time there's a Friday, you should have a retro. Monday or a Tuesday, one of those days. Just pick one of them. I've not found anything that's been like trigger based on something happening to be a great time for a retro.
Well, we've
maybe
had
I have triggers.
We've had impromptu ones that were triggered by an event.
Impromptu, I think, is different. That's not, hey, we're triggering every time we do a release, or we're triggering every time somebody yells at somebody in the pit.
I would not recommend that kind of a trigger, because I think that would create a predictable behavior pattern that would not be effective. a trigger should be something that's defined, that's based upon a specific scenario.
Like what? Can you give an example of a good trigger?
Like our team has a morale problem. So, listening to this podcast called This Agile Life, we heard this guy named Amos King talk all about this thing called the happiness metric. So we Googled it and we looked at Amos's picks, and we as a team have decided we are going to track and visually chart our happiness metric for the next 2 weeks. We write that, we say we go do it. Okay, we do it. In 2 weeks, we say we have been tracking the happiness metric for 2 weeks. Is it providing value? Yes or no? That's an event trigger.
Where was the event? Was 2 weeks?
The event
said
was
you were going to try.
Yeah, the event was the event in this case would be the end of the experiment period, and the length of the experiment period may vary based upon the nature of the experiment.
So that doesn't feel like event driven to me. That feels like time driven. Like it's still here we're gonna commit to this amount of time. It's the same thing as saying we're gonna have one every.
An event to me, event driven would be some sort of exceptional case came up.
Yeah,
like our process. We had a process failure.
Oh, basically. I got one.
Every 20 stories that we complete, we're going to have a retro.
So it sounds like we have a definitional issue here, because Amos is talking about a specific repeatable event that triggers the retros, and Craig is talking about what previously Amos called an impromptu retro that just occurs when you need it. That's kind of what I was talking about with is retros or discussions that occur when you need it. So what are we really getting at here? Are we talking the same thing?
They're both of value, I think.
I think you need both.
It's okay to have an impromptu retro if you want to address something, but don't not schedule a retrospective every week or every other week or on some sort of short schedule of that kind of time frame, because you won't do it. You'll stop doing them.
But what if I've got two people on my team and I'm pairing all the time, and every time an issue comes up, we discuss it and we figure out a solution for it. We may even set up experiments right there on the spot. Do I really need a retro then?
Yes, and you need someone else to facilitate your retro, because they've had teams that say, "Oh, we pair all the time, we do this," and I watch them, and they don't even realize there's a problem. Same with teams.
How is that going to come out in a retro then if they don't realize there's a problem?
Because the retro exercises are there to bring out those issues, to bring them to the forefront. They're tricking you into bringing them up.
Can we
get Tyson here before he explodes?
Yeah, it's funny. When you have teams that are putting off the retros or saying, I'm only going to do retros when I need them or anything like that, the problem is by the time you feel like you need a retro, you're already past the point that you actually needed a retro. So I think that you need both. You have impromptu ones for when something like really dire comes up, or if there is a problem, you can immediately address it. There's nothing wrong with immediately addressing a problem. Don't throw it in an envelope and wait till the retro. But also have retros to make sure that there aren't hidden problems that you aren't thinking about.
I only go to the dentist when my teeth hurt.
That's right.
Well, so I got a bunch of stuff.
I brush my teeth every day or when I need it.
Yeah, I only brush my teeth when there's stuff growing on them.
Yeah.
So first and foremost, a couple of things we could summarize that are all good recommendations is that retros, you should have multiple classes of service for retros. It's a very David Anderson answer.
I like that you gave it a title.
Well, no, it's this idea of we have a fixed class of service, which is kind of the recurring retro that's time based, or in my case, I said it was experiment based. But then we have this elevated class of service, like. Again, for some of you listening, it's January. We had the turnaround that was a meltdown today that launched the hour and 57-minute impromptu retro that we had in our director of sales office at the company I'm currently working with. So we piled into his office because that was the only place we could find, and we solved the problem. So
I think we need a retro class of service certification, and we could sell certifications for each class of service.
Ooh. So, Amos, why don't you jump on the plane with me? Come to David Anderson's Lean Kanban conference, which is in May, where we're going to do a whole bunch of. We're going to do Gung Ho there. We're going to do movie. I'll plug more stuff. Anyways, but But yeah, Amos, you could talk about that because I think most teams only have a single class of service and practices just like you described where they've got the burning issue, the turnaround that is a meltdown. They put it in the little Pandora's box. It sits there for 2 weeks until the end of the sprint. And then people open the box. They're like, what's up with this? And no one cares. That's a fail. So don't do that. Your team, to be safe, needs to have a mechanism to handle those things that just happen on demand. So the other one that I was just going to say...
Don't wait to fix the problem.
Well,
it'll just be a bigger problem.
Well, the other one, too, that I just want to make sure that Lee touched on, but I want to emphasize more for the small teams out there. And, Craig, I hope you experienced this with Diana. Did she bring the quilt?
Yes, she did.
So she brought a quilt. So what Diana uses, like in an open space, and she does this very well, like she has this whole quilt that she puts on the floor and effectively uses it as something to gather around. And she does that to create a unique environment. And the key thing about this environment is it's making your brain think. And so I see a lot of small teams that literally all they do is pair constantly, and they never get up, they never go to a coffee shop and have a conversation. All they do is work. And so to have an effective dialogue like a retro, you need to change the context somehow. So maybe go sit on a quilter in the park or go to the playground, go to McDonald's, whatever. But you got to get up and do something because otherwise you're not going to have an effective conversation.
So many of the things that she did were very subtle like that. Like she walked around, so she had the chairs arranged in a circle. We all sat, facing in, and she walked around the circle for probably 10 minutes or more. And, at first you're like, why is she walking? And then she explained it like it was to look at everyone else that you work with or maybe don't work with and need to get to know. And it was interesting. And she also had balloons, and they were, colorful balloons and colored markers and some posters she put up around. And all of those were just these subtle little things to get your mind working in a different way than it's used to.
I think I mentioned this on here before, but I've even had remote pairs where we're working remotely, and I say, we need to go on a walk together. And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm 800 miles away. And I'm like, yeah, that's fine. We're going on a walk, and I'll call their cell phone, and I'll go for a walk. And I've stopped and been like, I still hear the office. I can hear you typing. Get up and go outside, and I'll wait until I can hear cars and stuff going by, and we'll go for a walk and talk about the problem we were trying to solve. And they've come back to me later and said, that was the fastest way to solve that. Like, that was fantastic.
Yeah, and realize the key thing I think about all these things we're talking about environment, and this goes back to this retro I had today where the root cause was the who's on our teams? Who? What's on the teams, people?
People.
Thank you. People. People, not resources. And unfortunately, guess what? Our brains work at different speeds. And like again, I had this team that had a turnaround meltdown because some people on the team wanted to make a decision faster than someone else was capable of doing. So we figured out a way that we could actually have a process that would effectively slow them down, so they could all communicate effectively and then make a decision where they have a consensus and everyone understands the impact. So, well, let's see. We've been talking for a while. Why don't we do one more question to close this out? And I think we've done a whole whopping total of. I think our metrics would be what we've done. We've done 3 questions, and the 4th question is about metrics.
Nope. I think we should vote on the 4th question, and I'm marking one that is actually comment because before we ever even got on here, there was some tension there, and I think that we should clear the air.
Really? And you don't think a conversation about metrics with Lee and me here would not have tension?
No.
Oh, sure it would. Okay. So
because Lee would be right and you would be wrong. And
whatever.
Maybe not.
Let me show you my Monte Carlos. Oh, okay. So the question that has been highlighted in red to assert its dominance over all of us is
overall questions.
I did too. You see that?
It is the most superior question. So the most superior question of the day.
The reason he would be right is just because he's a doctor and you're not, right?
Oh.
But
he's got a piece that says he's right.
I have
his authority.
Boy, this is like John's sexual grade. It says, but I have an MBA.
Lee will not assert his authority, so I'm going to assert it for him.
Thank you, Amos, for being a provocateur. So our final question for the night, I feel like Megan Kelly here, is if you're only doing 30-minute retros, should you even bother doing them?
No.
And what did Ty say?
Ty says yes. I say no. Diana says no.
I think
she had a reason to back this up.
Okay.
I'm gonna go with Tice. Even if you're only doing 30-minute retros, if you're coming out with something to do and to change and you're focusing on it, I think it's okay.
I'm going to straddle the fence here and say I could be convinced that you could do a 30-minute retro and make it effective. Right. I have never been able to do one in 30 minutes and make it effective.
Yeah. Okay, so let's have some sanity here, because people are trying to drive their cars off the road right now. Okay, some ground rules. If you have a larger team, like I'd say more than 5 people, you're going to need more time. And one thing that Diana did say is just because of the mechanics of providing an opportunity for people to share what they think with the group. And so larger group takes more time to share. So small teams, these little 2-person or 2-person team, 3-person, 4, maybe up to 5, with a well-crafted plan, I believe you can effectively make it through the 5 stages of the retro and generate an outcome. If it's a newer team where the people are getting to know each other, not recommended because people need to learn. But if it's a team that's really matured and they're gelled and they know each other, I think it is feasible.
I agree with that. Maybe you might be able to get to a point where a 30-minute was possible. I think anything bigger than 4 probably is going to not be very effective in a half an hour.
Here's the thing, though. If you're doing 30 minutes, it's not set a timer and at the end of 30 minutes say, we're done, walk out. You. If it needs to take longer, it needs to take longer. But you can't have effective 30-minute retros, especially the impromptu ones that are focused.
Yeah.
We know what the problem is. We're trying to solve it.
Yeah. And it's don't schedule. I think it was more like don't schedule only half an hour for your retros.
Well, yeah.
Lee, say something before Tyson can.
I have a plea. I want to do it as a plea. Are
you going to give me pizza if I let you talk?
Well, no. I have a plea to all the facilitators out there, and I know why you have to do this, but can we please explore how to get beyond what I'm going to call mechanized facilitation? Which is where you're in an environment where to get a meeting room, you have to reserve it, and you reserve it for an hour, and the next thing you know, that forces your retro to be an hour. I think that practice, and unfortunately that is a necessary evil of how most organizations work, except for something I'm going to make Craig talk about, I think, is figure out a way to not fall victim to that. If that means you have to go reserve a conference room for the whole afternoon or something, or borrow someone's office like I did today who was traveling, figure it out so truly you can have a retro and the team decides when it's done. They can stay as long as they want, and when they're done, they get up and they walk out, and they're not booted out of the space by someone else coming in because there's a scheduled session in that room.
I had 2 really great retros that I didn't have scheduled. One of them, we walked to the nearest corporate coffee place.
Yes.
And just sat down and took over, and we were actually told to be quiet. And I looked around and I said, we are the only people in here. And the lady goes, oh, yeah, that's true. And went back behind the counter.
Okay.
The second one was in an elevator.
Oh, I thought
what?
Could not get a room, and we just went and got in the elevator, and we rode up and down 3 times while we talked.
I actually love that, Amos. That's like you get like the elevator.
It's a coffee talk.
It's like an elevator pitch. Describe your idea. Describe your idea in the 30 seconds the elevator takes. So that's a brilliant idea.
Oh, you could use that as a retro game. Come on, guys.
Oh, come on. Dude, we totally should do that.
Yes.
We only have 2 floors in our building.
Yeah, but you got some really.
Take the stairs,
dude. You got a data center elevator in that building. It's huge. You could get like 6 teams on it. So, Amos, just for clarification, everyone. Before you do have a public retro, make sure that it is okay, because you don't want to be out in a public space talking about confidential stuff and get into an information assurance. So make sure you talk that through, okay?
All right, I want to make the case for retros taking generally longer than 30 minutes.
Okay, go for it.
So, first of all, Diana's book, the Agile Retrospectives book, talks about the 5 stages of a retro. And, first is setting the stage, and then gathering facts, and then brainstorming, and I don't remember the fourth one, but the fifth one is basically closing. You have to go through the process of each of those setting the stage is getting yourself into a mindset. And gathering data is making sure that when you're trying to solve the problem, that you're actually solving a problem that you do have and not one that you don't have. So all those take some time, and it's going to take some time to brainstorm, and it's going to take some time to choose something that you think is going to be effective. It takes time to think. And a lot of these things are subtle. Just setting the stage, you're like, oh, we don't need to set the stage. We can just go in and let's just go brainstorm some solutions. But your brains don't work that way. They take time to settle down. And, if you're going to brainstorm, it helps to be in a creative environment. And so mixing things up is definitely a way to get that creative environment. Go to that elevator or coffee shop or go to the park, do something that's going to change the way you're thinking, and you'll come up with much better retrospectives.
So it's quiet, and we've been talking about these questions for a while. I don't know. Want to do one more? Or should we close it out?
Tice, I know you really want to do that metric question.
No, only that
We're time.
Oh, her lightning round. Her only guidance was don't use velocity.
+1.
That's all you need to
know. You can use cycle time. You always use cycle time instead of velocity.
Yeah, but don't use velocity. That's all you need to know.
You can use velocity to predict what you might do as a team. Do not use it to compare teams.
Yeah,
I think you should use WTFs per hour.
So one bonus. So Craig, I do want to ask you a question, and I do not know the answer. I'm just curious. So back to the retros and this, what I'm calling the mechanized facilitation, which I think is bad. Do you, in your environment, do you have your retros in your team spaces?
Most of the time, I don't like that at all.
You don't really?
No, I think you need to change your perspective by being in a different space.
Yeah, and it's fine.
I'd rather get a conference room or even more an open space where you're not going to be bothered, but that's harder to do.
Put it this way, there's science to that, which I support, but I do think your organization is really cool because the what your organization, they've kind of done the guidance that I know I was joking about once, saying that, hey, if you ever wanted to build like a cool agile environment, you should like go get an old school, because like a classroom makes a great size for like a team area and would have some extra space for like a meeting corner and all the devs and like the business folks to all kind of have little work centers, but then all be able to collaborate. And your organization has built that where you actually have like little physical rooms that each group works in, which is really cool. So
we've got workstations, standing desks that sit or stand, and then we've got like a couch and some chairs and another table and a big monitor that those are centered around.
Oh, grade school would be fantastic. At least mine, we had like a room in the back of the room that was the coat closet, but it was really a room. And it was like a nice place that you could have to get away and get some.
Put Amos there when he's bad.
Oh, really? I thought I was gonna get put back there. Jeez.
Thought about
as long as we can get better chairs.
Well,
yes.
Yeah. Well, so one closing comment, just want to pass along. As we mentioned, Diana Larsen was in St. Louis in January 2016. Her appearance was actually part of an event that was hosted by CenturyLink. So thank you to CenturyLink for helping us bring Diana Larsen to St. Louis so she could actually have an open event that really did help to benefit our local Agile community here. So, but let's go on here and let's do our picks. Is that cool?
Let's.
All right.
Sounds good to me.
So let's have this week's hottest picks.
Hottest picks.
Who would like to go first?
Let's go in the order they're listed.
Instead of the hottest picks, we should start with the hottest person. Lee.
Tice.
Let's use the decider protocol.
This is 98% chimp, and for me, that's hot.
Okay, so recap of things I know I mentioned on the podcast. A couple books. So a book about clean language. It's a way to ask, open questions using metaphor to promote learning. So it's a book. Check it out. We'll put the link in the show notes. Also, this idea of using open space to facilitate agile transformation. There's a book about it by Dan Mezek, and he does workshops on it. So we'll put that link on the website. And my third pick is this. It is submission season. So number one, thank you to Craig, who has shared an idea to present at Agile 2016. Craig, we thank you for sharing that. And also want to say thank you to all of our reviewers for all the tracks who are looking over submissions and giving feedback and are going to help us pick a wonderful program. But if you would like to share an idea, it is not too late. You have until February 9th to submit an idea. We'll have the website on our show notes, so go check out the process. It's actually pretty... Craig, is it easy?
It's fairly easy.
It's a pretty easy process. So if you got an idea, you want to come and share it with people who would be interested in learning from you, I like to say you got to be in it to win it. So write it up, and hopefully it might be part of the program. So we look forward to hearing what you have to share. So check out and share an idea today. The conference website is in the show notes. Lee is next.
So I put on something called Stack Exchange that is on purpose. Sounds like Stack Overflow because it's basically Stack Overflow for abstract concepts. And in particular, if you go to programming.stackexchange.com, you will get the programming concepts, which has a lot of cool little abstract discussions and questions and answers. So it's kind of fun.
I don't think they're all abstract. I think there's like English language one, which I kind of enjoyed. It's basically a network of sites that are like Stack Overflow, but for different topics.
Yeah.
Okay. According to our authoritative list here, Craig is next.
Alrighty. My first pick is the Elm programming language. And I've got two videos that I think you should watch that will probably sell you on it pretty well. The first is by Evan. I don't know how to say his last name. Zapliki, I think.
Ugh, good luck.
It's called Controlling Time and Space, Understanding the Many Formulations of FRP, which is Functional Reactive Programming. Pretty popular in the JavaScript space with Flux and React. And the other one is by Richard Feldman, and it is Make the Backend Team Jealous, Elm in Production. Both of those come from Strange Loop Talks. They are on where are they? YouTube. And they've sold me on it. And I started an Elm user group in St. Louis because I want to learn it and need an excuse. My second pick is the idea of a do tank. It's like a think tank, but they do stuff instead of think about stuff. And I wish I remembered where I heard that idea, but I heard it sometime last week. And I did look it up and found some think and do tanks, but not just a plain do tank. So
how is this different than a makerspace, Craig?
Well, like a think tank isn't so much as, well, maybe it is. I think a think tank has more directed focus, like they're going to think about, political solutions for XYZ. So I think it'd be like a makerspace with sort of a direction that they're trying to solve some specific problems.
Okay, and this will be interesting. Amos, it looks like you have some very scholarly picks here. Could you tell us about them?
I do. I've got one pick. It's called Neural Schemas Toward a Comprehensive Mechanism of Mind. It's somebody's dissertation that we all know and love. I'm not going to say who it is, so you guys are just going to have to go out and check it out, and then tell us what you think. It is a dissertation, so it's dry, but it's good. I'm kidding. I have no idea. I've only read part of it.
So that's your first scholarly pick. Now your next scholarly pick is what?
Northernbrewer.com. So I started brewing my own beer based on my brother-in-law, who's also a software developer, who decided that I needed to brew my own beer. So contrary to my wife's wishes, he bought me a brew kit for Christmas, and I think I'm hooked.
Okay.
Hooked or drunk?
I'm not drunk. I haven't. I had a little sip today after I tested the specific gravity of my current, but I haven't actually bottled anything yet. But I'm getting like way drawn into all the science part of it and stuff, and I feel like a chemist, and it's kind of crazy.
So, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, that is all we have time for tonight. So, just like your current sprint, this podcast must come to an end. But what do you do at the end of your sprint, everybody? What do we do?
Have a retro?
We have a retro.
Relax.
What do we need to have a retro? Come on, we just talked about Diana Larsen. We need some data. So if you're listening to us, guess what? We love your feedback. So that will help us get better. Make sure we have a great podcast that you guys all enjoy listening to. So with that, send us some feedback on Twitter, email, web, whatever, or connect with us on Slack. We have a Slack channel. Thank you, Amos, for setting that up. And most importantly, everyone, keep living this agile life.